Welcome back. I feel 100% better today. My eyes are no longer weeping, my sinuses are open and free. I just feel a lot better. Thanks be to God. There's nothing crummier than having a cold. But anyway, today we're going to talk about getting this launch platform in good order, the brass. Your bullet is all part of the exterior and terminal ballistics, but this is your internal ballistic. This is the launch platform. Everything starts from here. You know, it's like a computer. You know, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have this situated correctly, everything else is going to fall apart afterwards. So I'm not going to go into any fancy things that you've never heard of before. Everything I'm going to be doing is standard. It's been around for decades, literally decades. I've been reading about some of these things I read were done by bench rest shooters back in the 30s. So nothing's new under the sun. We have better equipment to do it with, and we have better dies, we have better bullets, we have, you know, a lot of better things. But they had some pretty terrific barrels, you know. Some of the best barrels being made today are being made on machines that were made, 50 or 60 years ago. So, nothing's new. I'm not going to be doing any fancy things. I'm not going to be doing anything that amounts to, waxing the, drive shaft on your truck to make it go better. Some of these things are silly that I see out there. I'm not going to have you spending unnecessary money, that's for sure. I'm going to keep it down to basically, it's just the basics. Some of these things that you're going to be, that you might need to buy, you'll be able to use for other cartridges and different calibers forever. So first of all, the brass weight can vary from one case to another, and that is largely dependent on the quality of the manufacturer that starts out with. I believe, from my experience, these are Starline cases. Starline is my understanding, is a division of the same company that makes Sierra bullets, and they make terrific brass. Now, their brass is largely it's ready to go, not completely. All brand new brass needs to be finished and made ready to load. Don't ever just take brass out of a bag that you buy at your local store or something and just start loading it, because there's a lot of things that are going to be incorrect. They're handled in batches. They're going to have dented case mouths. You're going to have distortion in one way or another sometimes, and sometimes there's going to be differences in overall length. Now, with certain brands of brass, Lapua probably stands alone as being the superior brass when it comes to absolute uniformity. These aren't bad either, from my experience. The Starline brass. Seiko brass is very good. That's also extremely good brass. Domestic brass, Winchester Federal and Remington, I found that to be, it's haphazard. It runs the mill. You can have wide variations with cases of, a 30-06 size case like this is a 270 case. You can have variations of 3.5, 4, 5, even 5 grains I found in one batch of brass. That can cause issues with differences in internal pressure. And when you have differences in internal pressure, you're certainly going to have those flyers that you don't want. And you're certainly going to have, when you have differences in internal pressure, that's the basis for your velocity. And so especially at longer ranges, you might have a difference in drop at 300 or 400 yards that might amount to 2 or 3 inches. It may not be a big deal with big game rifles and things like that. And that's why, if you just stuff your previously fired brass and keep on shooting it, you basically have factory fodder, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're going to have the same degree of consistency or lack thereof, but that's industry standard stuff. What we're seeking to do, as I told you, is to eliminate those variations. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run each of these 20 cases, through a sizing die. Now, I'm not going to use a standard industry sizing die. I'm sure you're familiar with that if you're watching this. Standard industry sizing die, full-length sizing die is like this one right here. It's got a decapping pin on it, and that decapping pin, after it punches out the old primer, the die forces the brass down to its original factory dimension, what's called for by the industry standard for chambering into your rifle. I don't have my glasses on, so I'm kind of gawking at things and trying to get them to work. There we go. The problem with that type of die is, and I'll talk about full-length resizing and also partial resizing, and I'll also talk about neck sizing with that type of die that you can buy from RCBS or any number of manufacturers. That type of process, basically, think about taking your fingers and running it down an old brown banana. As you slide it down, the banana kind of squeezes along and it bulges and it distorts and it gets gooey and everything. Well, brass will do essentially the same thing under the force of your press handle. As that die is squeezing down along it, it's forming a wave that's finally being ironed out as it goes all the way to the bottom, and that's good. That's what the sizing die is supposed to do. It's supposed to basically iron it all out until it's all pressed out the way it was originally. If you partial resize and just try to do a neck sizing alone, you're going to create that ripple ahead of the die, and right at the juncture of the shoulder, you're going to end up with a bulge there. You're going to basically end up with two shoulders. It's going to come down, it's going to go out and come down, and it's going to have your shoulder. And I don't like that. I simply don't like that. I found that it doesn't make for great looking ammo, and it's a good way to get around things, if you have to. But there's better solutions. The other solution is to get a neck sizing die, a standard neck sizing die. They look just like a standard full-length resizing die, and the only difference is that it's configured so that it can only size the entire neck. That's preferred. That's definitely preferred over creating that double shoulder. However, it also is causing the full force of that press to come down on this brass, and especially if it's newer brass where you have softened, annealed brass at the top, that can cause differences in distortion that can basically force that neck down and cause differences from one case to another in overall length and all sorts of things like that. It's not what I consider to be the easiest or the best way to do things. And what it's also doing is you're sizing just the neck. With both of these processes, you're sizing the brass, and then afterwards you're dragging out the sizing button, the neck sizing button, and you basically you're swaging the inside of that brass to meet the demands of the button that's being pulled out through, and you can hear it. If you don't have it lubricated, you can hear that as it yanks out. So basically, you're bunching the brass in, then you're yanking it out. It's a violent maneuver, which I don't think does any good for the uniformity and consistency of your brass size. This is Lee's alternative, which I think is absolutely brilliant. This is their neck sizing die, and I'll take it apart here and show you. Some people don't quite understand the process that's involved here. This is a simple aluminum cap under which there is a piece right here. This is conical shaped inside, and you'll notice that the decapping pin, it doesn't have a sizing button on it because you're not dragging the button out. This is a mandrel. It's an entirely different process. This is a mandrel. Inside this whole system is the secret to it. These are 4 fingers. This is a collet, 4-fingered collet. Just like you find on a brown and sharp collet that's on a lathe or anything like that. This basically, as this interior conical shape meets it, and under pressure, it presses those fingers together, and those fingers press that brass uniformly. The entire brass neck at the same time is forced down around this mandrel right here, and this mandrel is 1/1000th less. It's exactly what the doctor calls for. It's exactly the same as when you use your resizing button on a standard die. It sizes it down to 1/1000th less than the actual seated bullet. So we're going to put it back together again. Got to put my collet in first. Okay, now we got it finally. Did you follow all that? So anyway, let me do that again so you can see what it is. Here's the threaded end right here, the threaded end of the die, and your decapping rod, decapping pin, and your mandrel, and your fingers, and here's your die body. This doesn't do anything. This is simply what houses the whole mechanism. So that goes in there, and then this followed up by your decapping rod, and turn this cap on. You don't have to turn that on hard. That's just held on finger tight. Don't tighten it down hard. It'll never come undone. So, but that's the way I prefer to do things. That squeezes the brass down, and then it just simply lets it go, and the brass is removed, and life is good. That mandrel doesn't drag on the inside of the case. It doesn't drag on the inside of the neck, and the outside of the collet does not drag on anything either. Basically, it just squeezes down and just lets it go. So that's my preferred method. They all work. You know, use whatever method you prefer. I'm telling you how I do it because this is how I've derived the best accuracy that I've had so far in my life. It's been since I've been using this. One other thing too, this mandrel floats inside, and it can do that because, as you saw, it has a slight taper on it, and that just finds its way into the case neck, and the case neck is what causes that pin to become centered and drive down straight into your flash hole. So the whole thing is perfectly engineered. You don't have any stresses there that's going to cause things to break that you very frequently have, which is why they sell parts for all these other dies. So we're going to put that back together, and I'll bring you over here in a minute. We're going to size down all these cases. Now, the really nice thing about using a neck sizing die, regardless of whether it's a industry standard type neck sizing only die, or whether you're using one of these Lee collet dies, is that you don't use any, it's absolutely not required to use any lubricant. Now, I'm going to back this off so you can see. I'm forcing this handle down. In order for this die to work correctly, that has to be crushing around that case. So the last 5 degrees or so of this press handle, I'm pushing down and forcing it, and that's vital. Otherwise, if you just run it in and bottom it out, it's not going to have any. Now we just simply pulled that out. I've got a perfectly sized case that requires no lubrication. That noise that you hear is simply, that's the case neck just sliding down that mandrel. Okay, that's the last one. Now hearken to this. Never use a neck sizing die only or partial sizing whenever you're changing rifles, because each rifle has its own distinct signature chamber, depending on how it was headspaced. And you can run into two different rifles that have the same exact chamber dimensions inside, but it's highly unlikely. And in most cases, you're just going to simply have a box of brass that won't be able to fit into the other rifle. So never use neck sizing only unless it's going to be used in the same rifle. Never use neck sizing only. Always full-length resize if you're going to be using in lever action rifles or auto loadings or anything besides a bolt action rifle or a single shot rifle that has sufficient camming action that can bring this case into the chamber and seat it properly. So that's the resizing process. Now I want to give you a heads up. I've spoken to you probably out of both sides of my mouth when I'm talking about neck sizing and full length sizing, and you're saying, what's all that about? We're talking about super accurate ammunition. Well, there's a cautionary involved here. Neck sizing only does provide perfect alignment of the case within the chamber, and it will allow for the following steps that I will show you how to get the bullet properly aligned with the bore. But it should never be, neck sizing should never be employed for hunting purposes or for competitive situations where, rapid cycling of the bolt is necessary. The firmness that's required to press that bolt home can really cause problems in a hunting situation. And not only that, but the extraction can be a little bit more difficult too, because that case is learned to be, it's partnered with that chamber so tightly that even lifting the bolt up and, driving it home can be very, very difficult. It's not the thing to do when you're out on a hog hunting trip and you get some hog that are screaming around you. And it's certainly not the thing to do when you're on a, important hunting trip. The gain in accuracy for what you're doing, for neck sizing only, is minuscule. You're only talking about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch in most situations. That's fantastic. That's a fantastic thing for the bench rest shooter who's trying to get that group down tight, and it's great for the varmint hunter or for anybody who wants to just have those bragging size groups. But leave that at home for the, when you're doing the hunting field. It has no place in that environment or in a rapid fire competitive situation. Your brass will last a lot longer when you're doing neck sizing only, because you are eliminating the work hardening of the brass case itself. The neck does not expand and contract that much in successive firings. There's very little space around the neck. So keep it simple and keep it real. Don't misapply the terms. We're still going to be producing super accurate ammunition, even if you don't just do a neck sizing. If you do all the other things that I'm going to show you, you're still going to have super accurate ammunition. So don't confuse what you're trying to do. So that's it. Thanks so much to all my Patreon subscribers for your assistance and your dedication. It's helping me to do the things like this, to buy this expensive brass, to bring you this video, to buy bullets. The costs are phenomenal, as you know right now. Prices have over doubled from just a couple of years ago. So I appreciate your assistance, and if you're not a Patreon donor, please visit that channel. I've got the link here, and Benny is here. He's waiting to go upstairs and maybe have some breakfast. So thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. God bless.